Hi, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live broadcast on the release of the ISM Services PMI Report. My name is Dan Zeiger. I'm a senior writer and editor for Inside Supply Management, which is Institute for Supply Management's member publication. And welcome to our discussion as we break down the Services PMI data for November. There was stronger business activity growth, signs of life with orders, particularly on backlogs and exports, as well as employment, and a small ray of sunshine, maybe, on prices. We'll discuss those details and more today as the composite PMI reading increased slightly to 52.6%, which suggests that the services sector is hanging in there as we head into the holiday season. As usual, there's lots to talk about, so let's bring in the chair of the ISM Services Business Survey Committee. His name is Steve Miller. Steve, how you doing?
Great to be back, Dan.
Yeah. I know there was a lot to talk about. As I said, I know in the call that you the conference call that you had earlier today. Obviously, some solid numbers there, but there were the usual caveats and cautionary tales. Just to break down what stood out to you in November.
Yeah, so it was very interesting stuff. Given all the interesting events of the year, I started a month or so ago starting to look at trends year over year, 12-month averages, that type of thing more closely. And what was interesting and very positive of the 52.6 ISM Services PMI this month is that three of the components, there's four components that make it up: business activity, new orders, supplier deliveries, and employment. The first three, business activity, new orders, and supplier deliveries, are all above their 12-month average, and they're also, as is the overall PMI, and they're also all in expansion territory. So for me, taking out all the noise around tariffs and things that happened during the summer and that type of thing, that looks like a positive sign. Employment, although below, it's still in contraction territory. It's seen 4 months in a row of increases to the number, although still in contraction. And that's 0.1% below its 12-month average. So all signs looking positive. That's kind of the micro view over the last year. The macro view is that the 12-month average is its second lowest since 2010. So overall economy growth is slowing year over year, but it looks like from a May till now, a little bit of an uptick, a good uptick, from 49.9 to 52.6. So positive signs there.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into some of those specific index readings that you brought up, and we'll get to those and more as we go through our broadcast today. New orders index decreased from 56.2% in October to 52.9%. But there were other demand readings that were encouraging. You had mentioned backlog of orders, 49.1%, new export orders to 48.7%. You wrote in the report that these kind of demand index readings are good signs of a potential or emerging recovery for the sector. Just elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. Up is good, down is bad, generally speaking, except for the prices, and maybe inventory and inventory sentiment, right? Depending on whether you're getting ready for peak season or whether you're just through it and you ordered the wrong stuff. Very, very good sign on the backlog. It's been wobbly, and I think we have some time to talk about that a little bit more. But well above the 12-month average for backlog of orders. So good sign there. When you look at new orders being down, the 52.9%, which is down, is still 0.9% above the 12-month average. So I still view that as a positive sign. Certainly looking at the numbers over the last 6 months, which I'm looking at the numbers over the last 6 months. And then just looking compared to the 12-month trend.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you had mentioned the wobbly, maybe the volatile is a word that maybe is a little too strong. Maybe fidgety is a better word. For the backlog of orders index. And you had mentioned in previous broadcasts, you've talked about it. It's been kind of on a downward trend for 3.5 years now. That index did reach its highest level since February, when it was 51.7%. But the last 4 readings that you had talked about or referred to, 40.4% in August, which was actually that index's lowest since May of 2009. And if you remember what was going on in 2009, you understand that's pretty significant. September, it moved up to 47.3%. October back down to 40.8%, and then up to 49.1% in November. What's going on in your eyes there?
So this is the first time I think I've called out the supplier deliveries as being clearly, or from the commentary, clearly related to a specific event during the month, which was the government shutdown, where we saw air traffic get significantly impacted. We didn't see much commentary around backlog of orders being impacted based on inability to get supply. But the inability to deliver air freight or receive air freight certainly would have an impact in your ability to fulfill orders. So that's one piece that I wonder if is part of what we're seeing in the number. The second piece, though, that's a more positive sign is on the new orders index. If you look at that over the last 6 months and over the last 12 months, 52.9 is a good number. We're seeing the backlog of orders on a trend line since the May timeframe, where we saw the lowest PMI number. We're seeing that trend upward. For me, the 40.4 went up to 40.8 over 2 months. And the 47.3 went up to 49.1 over 2 months. So for me, if you take them segmented that way, you look at positive movement on backlog of orders without a huge spike in the supplier deliveries. But the 54.1 is the highest we've had since October of last year, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. I did want to talk to you about supplier deliveries, so we'll go straight into that question. The highest index reading for the supplier deliveries index at 54.1% in November. That is the highest in 14 months, if my math is correct. And a reading in expansion indicates slower deliveries, which you would expect, if demand is up. But we think that this was primarily not due to demand, but some of the dynamics that you recently discussed with the air traffic disruptions and the shutdown, and there were a couple of, not many as usual, which we'll talk about later, but there were a couple of comments about tariffs being a factor as well. Just to discuss that whole supplier delivery situation.
Yeah. So for me, Dan, looking at back several months, 51, 50. 0.3, 52.6, 50.8, and then 54.1. It does look like low 50s are a pretty typical number for us from a supplier delivery standpoint. So the 54.1, I'm looking at, maybe half a month of air traffic impact. So maybe instead of 54.1, it should have been a 52 or a 51.5 or something like that. And I kind of looked at that relative to the services PMI and saying, services PMI is up from 52.4 to 52.6. Well, about 0.8 of that can be attributed to the increase in the supplier delivery number, given that it's up 3.3%. month over month. So then how much of that 0.8 is slower supplier deliveries due to demand, and how much of that is related to airline disruption? It's going to be a portion of it. It's not going to be all of it related to improvement in demand. So I'm looking at kind of that carry through to the services PMI. Maybe we would have had a 52 or a 52.2, still a really solid number. But that's kind of how I rationalized in my brain anyway. You have to decide on your own whether that my brain is working correctly. But that's kind of how I thought through it. Still a good number, showing a increase in business activity. Probably not all related, but some of it definitely related to the government shutdown.
Yeah, no, that was no. I'm a student, so I kind of get it. How those all those indexes kind of are interconnected. So yeah, I found it fascinating. So yeah, your brain is working just fine for me. But yeah, another index that that is among the four that feed into the composite PMI is the employment index, of course. Obviously, federal data has been spotty on that as of late. But our index increased to 48.9% in October, and that's the highest reading since May. So I'm sure that was encouraging in many ways. Among companies surveyed, 15.6% reported adding staff. That's up from 14.3% in October, but there was also a slight increase in those that indicated that they were decreasing headcount. So maybe a mixed bag there, maybe a seasonal dynamic. I'll let you opine on that. But also wanted to point out we got the ADP report today. That revealed a decrease of 32,000 jobs, which was one of the more disappointing numbers in a while. But you got, we were talking before we went on air about how it's kind of, consistent with other data that we've seen recently. Yeah, just, give the lay of the employment land in November.
Sounds good. Yeah, I believe it was the BLS numbers. Was that the number that came out last week of 130?
Yeah, the delayed numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. So 130,000 versus replacement level, which I've heard is around 150 plus or minus, shows, slight contraction. So seeing the ADP numbers being negative is not really a surprise. I think it's all very consistent. Wasn't a huge negative, but that's what BLS told us, and that's what our PMI segment or subindex numbers around employment have been showing us. Is that and it's been showing us kind of a mild contraction, ongoing mild contraction in employment, which if what is it? It's if somebody else loses their job, it's a recession. If you lose your job, it's a depression. So it's, for people that are having a tough time finding a role or are losing their roles, difficult times overall across the services industry. The way I interpret that number, Dan, is that we've seen some uncertainty around demand and around new orders and what kind of strength will sustain there. So people are being cautious about backfilling jobs. But we're not seeing anything in the commentary that's saying we're having across the board layoffs, significant labor reductions. It's all cautious about hiring, slowing down the rehiring of open roles or attrition. And we've seen that commentary for, 5 months. If we were seeing a real concern from companies around the economy, we would see that number be much more negative than the 48.9 that we have. The one encouraging piece is that, we're right at the 12-month average and we've weathered the storm of the 46, 47. But kind of on the opposite side of inflation, if you see employment weak and the employment levels reducing, staying flat for those people that were in that reduction is really bad news. We want to see that number start kicking up, and I'm encouraged by the May through November services PMI that we may just be seeing that sustained recovery that we've all been hoping for.
Yeah. Well, obviously, prices are a topic that is something we're going to discuss every month. For at least the near future. And we had a significant threshold reached in October when the prices index did exceed 70%. But in November, it dropped down a little bit to 65.4%. And 14 industries reported higher prices paid. That was down from 16. So was there, is there a little ray of sunshine there, as I may have alluded to in my introduction?
I think it is. I think it's a little ray of sunshine, not huge beaming sun, but it's the lowest it's been since before the tariff impacts started being discussed. So we knew tariffs were on their way well before that, but we didn't start getting decisions other than the early steel and aluminum um, decisions that were made. We didn't see other actions being taken until after April, and the April number is the lowest number we've seen prior, or is slightly lower than this month's number. So it's the lowest one that we've seen in the recent history compared to this month. Very positive from my perspective. It's inflationary. Price increases are inflationary from next month. If it were 50 and we were seeing on average no increase in prices, you still had the increases the previous months. So you're still paying more. You're just not paying more month over month. So we want to see those numbers coming down, certainly. But that drop to below the 12-month run rate and a reduction in commentary around tariffs and tariff impacts, I think to me shows that we have, at least at the buying level for the services industries, we've seen that pressure level off to where it was before the major tariff discussions and agreements were being, and non-agreements were being implemented. Yeah.
I'm just making an observation. I mean, you can add a thought to it afterward if you like. I didn't notice this until now, but I was looking at the list of commodities up in price, and in recent years, obviously, you're used to seeing that very long. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items on it, and also we have the trend designation, how many months they've been there, and usually you see a lot of commodities with months in double digit stays there. But copper has been up for 4 months. Labor has been up for 4 months. Now labor typically is in there on and off for long stretches of time in recent years, but it's been up for only 4 months in its most recent stretch, and software licensing up for 2 months. So I mean, that's got to be encouraging as well. I mean, that there aren't too many commodities or products that are just like nagging, inflationary. Is that an accurate takeaway from that?
It's the same takeaway as mine. We'll see. Time will tell whether it's accurate or not. But same takeaway as me, Dan, is that we're seeing less. During a couple months, we saw huge numbers of commodities that even though we weren't seeing repeat in many cases across multiple companies, which is what's required in order for it to actually make our list, there was a long list of individual items that were being reported from our respondents. The length of the list has gone down, and the number of repeats that we're seeing is moderating a bit as well. And then, where you see gasoline and lumber and engineered wood products decreasing in price, that's certainly a positive sign from a consumer perspective. If we can just get those pesky interest rates to come down, that'd be a really good sign for the housing industry with fuel, wood, and engineered wood products down and interest rates more affordable. That could be something that's well needed in the construction industry, because we're going on, gosh, what is it? 18 months? How many months in a row we've got for our construction being in contraction? 7 months. 7 months in a row that we've seen construction and contraction, and that's juxtaposed to utilities that has been in expansion for well over 2 years. So you take utilities out of the picture, then you think about residential and other construction being down even more. It's time for that industry and employment there to hopefully come back.
Yeah, I did see a couple of articles this morning about the services prices index reading and how that might be digested by the Fed. So that is an interesting dynamic to keep aware of in the coming weeks. You had alluded to tariffs. I noticed it as well, as we're kind of waiting on a Supreme Court decision. And I saw a member of the administration say on TV that since much of the current inflation has been driven by services, tariffs are not necessarily a factor. I think some of our business survey committee members would be surprised by that, considering the level of comments that we've had in recent months. But as you alluded to, and as I noticed in the report, there weren't as many as usual. So just talk about that dynamic a little bit. I mean, was it less of an onerous issue for our panelists in November than it has been?
So I'd say yes, definitely less of an issue, given that we had about 20% of comments reflected some type of a tariff perspective or impact versus over 50% this summer. So that's a good sign in terms of a reduction in the amount that we're talking about it. If you can say the reason why we're not talking about it as much is either we've figured out how to deal with it or it's not impacting us as much. Maybe the other side of the coin is that imports and exports are still down below. They're in contraction still, and they're also below their 52 week or 12-month average. So I think from there you can surmise that there's still tariff impact on global business from an import and from an export order standpoint. And we're not out of the woods yet, but we can see the glade, from inside the trees.
Yeah. Well, this question, it's a chance to kind of plug something that's very important to us, and we think it's very valuable, not only for the supply management community, but the overall economic community. Our ISM supply chain planning forecast for the manufacturing and services sectors will be released on December 16th. We'll have more info on that before we wrap up today, and we'll also have a LinkedIn Live broadcast on it with Steve and Susan Spence, who's the chair of the Manufacturing Business Survey Committee. And, we typically don't like to make predictions here, but I'll just ask you this. Not only is it going to cover how 2025 went for our panelist companies, but it's also going to talk about what their expectations are for 2026. Just what would you like to see or hope to see, in the data regarding the services sector?
Yeah. So what I think is really interesting, Dan, and to kind of put faith in that number, or that report. The last report came out, said the rest of the year is going to be flat. Our PMI for the rest of the year was 51.3%, almost flat.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see what that report says around the outlook for next year. Hopefully these last couple of months on the PMI weren't blips, but they were the continuing trend from May. But I think we'll get a better sense for that when we have our semi-annual supply chain review.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, this is one of the fun questions at the end that I typically like to ask you. I mean, but because you've been in those rooms, but if I'm a CEO or I'm a C-suite executive, just what are some of the things that I should be taking away when I look at the November services data?
Hey, Dan, I'm an optimist, generally speaking, but always want to have my backside covered. I'd be thinking about making sure my recruiting team is solid, and I know where I need to go to get critical labor and what the critical job roles are to fill to support growth. Because as we get signals, if we get continued signals that growth is headed our way, it's going to be based on some of the commentary we get. It's difficult. There's difficulty getting qualified people for the jobs that we really need to have filled. And when everybody, it's just like getting that inventory when a factory shuts down. If you're first one in line, you don't have a problem. It's the people that are behind you that have the problem. So I'd be just making sure that my recruiting engine is tuned up and I'm ready to be able to go after people when I need them.
Yeah. Well, hey, Steve, this has been great. I'll always enjoy talking about what's going on in the services sector with you month to month. Anything that we haven't talked about or that I haven't asked, this month that you think might be that might be important to include before we wrap up?
You hit everything that I had on my list, Dan. Yeah. I appreciate it. Appreciate the great questions.
Yeah. Hey, well, that's super. We'll see you on the 16th with Susan Spence, and Have a lot of illuminating insights from that supply chain planning forecast, I'm sure. Thanks a lot, Steve. Yeah. And thank to you for joining us today. In a bit, you can go to ISM's website to read the roundup article that details a lot of what Steve and I have discussed here. And if you want to be a part of the ISM Manufacturing or Services Business Survey panels that help compile data for the ISM PMI reports, you can go to ismworld.org/join the panel for more information. And as Steve and I have discussed here, mark your calendars for December 16th when ISM releases the supply chain planning forecast for the manufacturing and services sectors. That report will detail recent performance and perhaps more importantly, panelist sentiments for 2026. That is on December 16th. Also that day, as I said, I'll join Steve and Susan Spence for a LinkedIn Live broadcast to break it all down. So we'll have a lot of fun with that. And we'll see you back here next month when we break down the ISM PMI reports data for December. And so for Steve Miller and for some good people behind the scenes who helped us today, Christina Cahill, Jennifer Stevens, I'm Dan Zeiger. We'll see you next time.